Hello and welcome to SEMA 2025 and the SEMA Collision Repair and Refinish stage. My name's Jason Black and I'm with iCar, and next to me is Steve Dawson. I'll let him introduce himself here in a minute with Hunter Engineering. And today we're talking about maximizing production with in-house alignment and ADAS. Steve, why don't you start by introducing yourself and telling everybody what you do?
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me, Jason. I'm Steve Dawson with Hunter Engineering. I'm the regional manager for the Washington, D.C. region, and I also work with a lot of the collision groups around the country and work specifically on the collision side and how we can improve that process through Hunter, through our equipment for the shops. Let's jump right in with maximizing production with in-house alignments and ADAS. So a lot of the times we have shops that are subletting things out, and there's a lot of times where we're wasting time by having that porter drive the car down the street. I like the little video there from Ferris Bueller with the guys taking the Ferrari for a quick ride. What we try and do with what we're trying to do and try and kind of instill in the industry is utilizing an alignment machine, ADAS equipment in-house to reduce a day or two or three, maybe depending on your operation, in your cycle time, and reduce that cycle time. That does a couple things. Not only does it get that car back to the customer quickly, it also helps the insurance company not lose a customer because that was a long time and they feel that, man, my insurance company didn't help me out. And it also really limits the productivity of the shop because we're moving cars in and out, we're moving them down the street, we may lose control of them, maybe even lose control of quality. So we try and move that process where we can start out by putting a car in the alignment rack, and instead of guessing at what's bent, actually determine this is exactly what's bent and order those parts when we order the hood and the fender and the other components. So we want to make sure that we're maximizing everything that's going on.
Yeah, the quicker that we can get the car back to the customer is better for everybody. And, in the collision side, as you know, most of your customers are in rental cars. Yep. So when we look at the financial side of it, for somebody, whether it be the insurance company, the customer, or whoever, every day rental cars are not cheap. So every day that it's spent in the shop is another day that customer's in that rental car as well.
Yep. So the number that I've heard, don't know if it's truly the number is $9 million a day is spent in the rental car industry. So if we can reduce a day off of every car that's in the shop, that's a significant amount of revenue for the insurance companies that translates into, not only is it a benefit for them, but also a benefit for the shop. So, and when we look at that, a 50-car shop, we're moving those cars through an extra day earlier. If our cycle time is 5 or 6 days, we're talking about as much as a 10% or more increase in productivity that can flow through that shop. So if we're averaging $5,000 a hit, that's a significant amount of revenue when you hit the end of the year, really just by better utilizing what we already have in the building. Or adding it to the building too far there. So, the other side of that is writing that first clean sheet. The cleaner we can write that first sheet, the better off we are. There's a few shops that I know that, when they have to do a supplemental claim, it's an all hands on deck. What went wrong and why did we do this? Because they're repair planning a car and they're identifying everything because they want to touch the car once and move it out the door as quickly as possible. And improving that cycle time and reducing those supplemental claims. Sometimes they're nice and easy where you're self-approving those. Other ones, it's a couple days waiting for an adjuster to come out.
So basically having the correct equipment in your shop and not having to get that car out allows you to get that information quicker and right up front. That's kind of what you're saying,
Absolutely,
right?
Yep, yeah, because you have it in your building, we're just going to use it to touch that car one more time, or the first time early on in the process to speed it all up.
And you're also on your schedule instead of their schedule.
Absolutely.
So ideally, if you are subletting it, then you think, well, if I get it to this shop at 1 o'clock, maybe I can get it back by this o'clock or tomorrow. You may be the third or fourth in line.
Right.
So that makes it even more complicated.
Yep, absolutely. The other thing that we find is that we're finding cars through this process that potentially might have been fixed because they didn't seem like a significant impact. And if the alignment was done at the end of the process, it would have gone through, gotten completely repaired, and then go to the alignment rack and go, uh-oh, there's frame damage, and I can't fix this car, and it's now going to be a total. And in most cases, the insurance company's saying, we're not paying you to fix all of what you fixed for a car that we're totaling out. So it's a great way to identify that. And again, it's if you got one piece of equipment, there's not a lot of pieces of equipment that you're going to have in a body shop that can touch that car 3 times through a repair. And that's really what we're looking at is how can we maximize that, the investment that we're making. Most of this equipment is not cheap. So we want to make sure that we're maximizing that as best we can.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked at shops where, and this was more on the alignment, we didn't have an alignment machine, and we subletted that out. And we get it over there, and they can't line it up, and they say, well, something's bent. Maybe it's a knuckle or something of that nature. But now they're, do you want us to put that on? Now you're trusting them. To your point, you're not getting that information for yourself. You're trusting somebody else, and then now you're paying somebody else to repair that or trying to get it back, and there's more time spent. So
Yeah, more wasted time back and forth, or they're going to try this part and that part because they probably didn't get all of the data that they needed to. So, and the biggest thing for me is improving that productivity through the shop. Let's reduce the amount of times we're moving that car. Let's reduce the times we're touching it. Have the equipment where we need it. Like you had said, something's bent. We get that all the time, and you get that alignment printout from a maintenance alignment, which is a very different alignment than a collision alignment. And they're looking at that going, I don't know what's bent. All I know is that my numbers are off. Where when we have the equipment in the shop and we're training our technicians to use it, we're actually getting those readings, understanding exactly what is bent, and having the documentation for the insurance company, which is critical in our space, is to be able to say, hey, this is bent and this number is why that's bent, and here's everything I need to document it. Same thing with identifying that we've got damage that was, a right side hit because the car got hit on the left side, but as we naturally react to an accident, turn our wheel to the right, and that shock gets driven through the tire, and we bend a right side control arm. If we're only aligning it at the end at the repair shop down the street, they're most likely not going to come back to us to say, hey, that control arm was a part of the original accident. But if we're doing that assessment ahead of time, we're identifying that not only do we have our left side damage from the accident, but we have right side consequential damage that happened because of the rest of the accident.
Well, and one of the key words for me there, you said, is documentation. In today's world, if it's not documented, you're probably not getting paid.
Right. Yep. Yeah. There's a good chance you're not getting paid. And what this ends up becoming is a very high dollar square footage within the shop. It's very productive because we're doing so many things with the same small square footage. So, as we talked about earlier, reducing the supplemental claims is a huge time drain on a lot of the process. If it's making 3 or 4 phone calls, and that has an administrative cost to it, that if we're eliminating that, we're not making those phone calls, we're not putting those claims together, maybe we're not even doing the our own pre-approvals if it's a direct repair that we're approved with. We're not waiting on adjusters, any of the other factors that come into supplemental claims.
And for me, one of the arguments in the past for subletting it and not buying your own equipment was not every car has ADAS. And yeah, now every car has ADAS. And it's not just one piece of the car. It's all over the car, So that argument doesn't fly anymore. So just about every front end, rear end collision, there's some form of ADAS that is involved.
Yep. And for all of that to work properly, the cars and the car itself and the body has to be pointed in the right direction, and we need to have those alignment readings to do it. And the big thing for me, is in what I do, I don't want to lose control over what I'm working on. And when I'm going to a sublet vendor for this, I'm leaving control of that car, putting it out to, the guy down the street that it may not be as big a priority for them to deliver that car by Friday as it is for me to deliver that car by Friday. So it may sit longer. I was in the dealership world, and we kind of had a hierarchy. Customer pay was pretty high, warranty, internal body shop was pretty low, and then external body shop in a lot of the cases, unless they were the guy that hooked you up and fixed the mirror that your tech scratched, they were usually pretty low in a priority level. So, utilizing that OEM procedure. So making sure that we're actually following that process. And the challenge with it is that process, if we're doing a lot of different makes and models, that process is very different from each manufacturer. So having a piece of equipment that has a consistent process in it that is consistent to follow no matter what make, but actually on the back end it's following that OEM procedure is critically important, especially as we talk about needing technicians in the industry. That makes that learning curve much faster, and it is a much better job done the first time with it. So again, that maintaining the control through the process. We don't want to be wasting time with shuttle drivers running down the street, tow trucks driving cars back and forth. We look at KPIs within our DRP arrangements and things like that. We start tacking on those shuttling costs and things. It gets expensive quick. $150 tow to take it a few miles down the street, and the liability of driving some of these cars without it being aligned or without the ADAS systems being calibrated gets pretty risky. So we don't want to necessarily throw somebody behind the wheel and send them down the road and find out that it's bad and it's going to lock up the brakes in the middle of the street.
Yeah, you're kind of setting yourself up for a lawsuit there.
Right, absolutely. So, factory approvals are key. Obviously, a little shameless plug for the Hunter stuff, but it's there's a lot of different companies that are factory approved and utilizing a piece of factory approved equipment that has the capabilities to be able to give you that pre-alignment assessment, do your final alignment and your ADAS calibration with one piece of equipment makes it that much more cost effective in the long run. And again, that learning curve is significantly less because now my technician's really only learning one piece of equipment, and it's taking them stem to stern. And with the way that these new systems are, and it's great that the factories are approving them now because we're using lasers and cameras to be able to calibrate lasers and cameras. And it really makes a lot of sense. Instead of using strings and plumb bobs to calibrate the latest and greatest of technology, let's use the latest and greatest of technology to calibrate that technology quicker.
I think we all can agree that we're glad OEMs are starting to utilize technology that is out there, regardless of the brand. There's good brands. You guys have one good brand as well, right? But you're right. The fact tape measures, plumb bobs, strings. I mean, we're what year are we in? It's
right.
2025. Why am I grabbing a tape measure and a plumb bob? So I'm glad that I think everybody's glad that the OEMs are starting to approve all this great equipment that's out there.
Right. Yeah, and it's really really pushing the limits of technology and making it very easy for the technicians to do the work. And what is the real key is that it's done right and then documented completely as well. So there is actually I want to kind of sorry, going the wrong way here. So that we talked earlier about that documentation as we're doing the pre-alignment inspection, but it's even more critical as we get to the end of our process that we've documented all of our repair process from stem to stern. So making sure that we've identified how many welds we put into that panel, as well as all the paint we used and how that all went through, right down to the condition of tires, the condition of the ADAS calibrations, and most importantly, where those targets were. That's one of the challenges that we've had in the industry is there's dimensions as to where to place those targets, and we've typically just relied on the fact that either we're taking a picture of it there, and I guess it's okay because we took a picture, or some people maybe get in depth and throw a tape measure on the floor to show where that target is set. But having documentation that makes it easy for the technician, it's not an extra step, that the machine itself is recording that data and exactly where targets are placed, so that when we're getting to the end of our repair process, we've got a single document that maybe has our pre-scan, our post-scans, that has all of our alignment readings, that our befores, our afters, and our ADAS calibrations all on a document that we can stick right into that customer's file. No matter what system they're using, it's in that file and documented. So God forbid it gets called into court, doesn't matter. We've got all of the data of everything that we did with that process all the way through. So
You know, and this is really no different than what we dealt with years ago with frame racks and measuring systems. There was a time I remember when people were subletting some of the frame hits because they didn't have their own frame machine, and people were not getting documentation. They were taking pictures like, say, oh, you know, this is bent, the structure's bent, and now, you know, nobody would think about turning in something to the insurance company without having documented how far off the structure is. And this is kind of the same thing, you know. I think we're going to get there to where this is your ADAS equipment is going to be a standard in your collision repair shop.
Yep.
I think it's going to be where it has to be at some point.
And that's where I think, you know, today it's going to be, or soon here in the future, it's going to be like a paint booth or a paint room. You know, years ago, maybe you had one, maybe you didn't have one, maybe you had curtains. Now you're to a point where you have to have a paint booth, and it's got to be a really good paint booth for some of these 4-stage paints and things. ADAS equipment, alignment equipment is going to be another critical part of it. Just recently had a car in for doing a demonstration, and we went through a kind of a simulated accident. It was, you know, if that car was sitting in a line of traffic and a car behind it kind of smacked into the back of it and it rolled forward and hit the car in front of it, so it messed up the 2 bumper covers. You're talking about 60% of the repair of that accident was ADAS calibrations, was not collision and paint work. You know, it was refinishing a couple of bumper covers and putting them on, but the rest of it was all calibration work. So if you're saying, hey, I'm just going to be good with subletting 60% of my business, you probably need a small shop, but it's probably not going to be very profitable for you in the end. So it's really how can we maximize that profits within our operation and make sure that we're getting all that additional throughput. You know, as we talked earlier, if we shave a day off of our cycle time, if we're got a 50-car shop and we could shave a day off of every one of those days, we're talking about maybe a 10% increase in the capacity for the same square footage that we have. The dollars and cents go a long way. So and then the real big part for me is that we get happy customers that we know they're going to hit something again. They're going to come back to us because it was a great experience. I was only out of my car for a few days. I got back into it. I loved how it was, and the insurance company says, hey, we're happy as a lark. We didn't spend as much in rental car. Your KPIs are lower, and you're actually, you know, you're giving me documentation. So if anybody questions this claim, I have everything I need right in the palm of my hand.
And I agree with you. The happy customer, that's the number one thing. And yet, let's say, for example, you are a day late. Even if you have the right equipment, customers will forgive that most of the time, a day or so here. What they will not forgive is picking that car up, taking it home, and things not work correct.
Right.
If you go out there and your blind spot doesn't work, any of that ADAS doesn't work, you're never going to see that customer again. Once they bring it back to you and get it done, because nobody wants to get it home, come back, and because everybody works. Everybody has its time out of their day. Nobody wants to do that.
And that loses you a lot of productivity to go back and fix that or find out, do I have to take it back to the sublet to get it done, or what was wrong and caused it? And that ends up costing us another car or two through the shop each month.
And like you say, being in-house, you can control that more.
Right. Yep. You're never losing control. So with that, I want to thank you and iCar for an opportunity to talk a little bit about bringing ADAS and alignment in-house in the collision space. I think it is the future of where we're going, and I really encourage every shop to look at it, no matter what you're using for those services. It is going to be a critical piece. It's going to be a success factor in large-scale collision centers going forward, because the reality is, as ADAS keeps advancing, our severity of our accident keeps getting lower, and it's going to mean that the large majority of our repairs are going to be smaller bumper hits, scratches on doors, and that sort of thing that are going to require those calibrations, those alignments that are going to require us to either outsource 50, 60, 70% of our business, or take care of it in-house and help our customers much quicker and easier.
Well, Steve, I want to thank you for your time and thank you for being part of our show. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you.